The earth was quiet in a way it had never been before. Not the quiet of fear, not the quiet of shock, the quiet of a world that had just learned something about itself that it had not known, something old and deep and powerful, the quiet of a world that had been told to kneel and had stood up instead. The Draen were gone. Their ships had scattered, fleeing past the edge of the solar system in broken groups. Their flagship destroyed, their commander dead, their great and terrible armada reduced to wreckage, drifting through the rings of Saturn. Those that survived did not look back. They ran the way all bullies run when they finally meet something that does not flinch, fast, blind, and silent. On Earth, people stood outside and looked at the sky. The dark shapes that had hung over their cities for days were gone. The sky was just the sky again, blue during the day, black and full of stars at night. But it did not feel the same. It would never feel the same. Because now they knew what was out there. And more importantly, they knew what was down here. Admiral Tae-ho returned to the underground base in Seoul. He had not slept in 3 days. His uniform was wrinkled. His eyes were red. But he walked with the same steady steps he always had, because the work was not finished. Winning a battle was not the same as winning a war, and he knew that the Draen Empire was vast. What they had defeated was a fleet, not a civilization. They would come back. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but they would come back. He sat at the long table in the war room. Bo-Ra was already there, along with a dozen officers and advisors. Screens on every wall showed data. Casualty reports, ship damage assessments, debris tracking near Saturn, communication intercepts from fleeing Draen vessels. The information was overwhelming, but one number stood out above all others. 0. 0 civilian casualties on Earth. Not one person had died on the surface. The Black Fleet had met the enemy in space, far from home, and had kept the war away from the people it was built to protect. That number mattered to Tae-ho more than anything else. Status of the fleet, he said. Bo-Ra pulled up a report. All 17 ships survived. Ships 3, 8, and 14 sustained heavy damage. Ship 14 lost its port engine and half its hull plating. Pilot Duyan is injured but stable. He is refusing medical evacuation and says, and I quote, that he will fly home with one wing if he has to. A few officers around the table smiled. Tae-ho did not, but something in his eyes softened. And the crew? He asked. 12 injuries across the fleet, none critical, no deaths. Tae-ho closed his eyes for a moment. 17 ships against 400. 12 injuries, no deaths. He did not believe in miracles, but he believed in preparation. 20 years of preparation had earned them this. He opened his eyes. Get me a channel to the fleet, and get me a channel to the world. It took 10 minutes to set up the broadcast. When it was ready, every screen on Earth lit up again, just as it had when the Draen had sent their ultimatum. But this time, the face on the screen was human. This time, it was Tae-ho. He sat in a plain chair, in a plain room, with a plain wall behind him. He did not wear medals or decorations. He did not stand behind a podium or wave a flag. He looked directly into the camera and spoke in a voice that was calm, tired, and firm. People of Earth, he said. 3 days ago we received a message from a force that called itself the Draen Empire. They told us to kneel. They told us we had no choice. They told us we were small and weak and alone. He paused. They were wrong. The world listened. For 20 years, men and women you have never heard of, worked in places you have never seen, to build something that would protect you if this day ever came. Engineers, pilots, soldiers, scientists. They gave up their lives, their names, their sunlight, so that you would never have to bow to anyone. Today, those people and their ships met the Drayan fleet near Saturn and broke it. The enemy is gone. Earth is safe. He leaned forward slightly. But I am not here to celebrate. I am here to tell you the truth. The universe is not empty. It is full of life, and not all of it is kind. What happened today will happen again. Maybe not the Drayan, maybe someone else, but it will happen, and when it does, we must be ready. He straightened. From this day forward, the Black Fleet is no longer a secret. It belongs to all of you. It is Earth's shield, and it will stand between you and whatever comes from the dark. We will build more ships. We will train more crews. We will go further. Not to conquer, not to rule, but to make sure that no one ever sends us a message like that again. The broadcast ended. Tejo leaned back in his chair and said nothing for a long time. 2 days later, he made another broadcast, but this one was not for Earth. This one was aimed outward, past the moon, past Mars, past Saturn, past the edge of the solar system, and into the deep black ocean of space beyond. It was sent on every frequency the Drayan had used, and on frequencies humanity had captured from a dozen other alien signals over the years. It was sent in Drayan language, in 3 other alien languages they had partially decoded, and in every human language spoken on Earth. It was short. This is Admiral Tejo of the United Earth Command. 3 days ago, the Drayan Empire ordered our world to kneel. We did not kneel. We rose. Your fleet is broken. Your flagship is dust. Your soldiers are running. Let this be understood by every empire, every council, every species that hears this message. Earth is not a colony. Earth is not a resource. Earth is not yours. We did not start this, but we finished it. And to anyone who thinks of coming here with chains and demands, know this: we do not bow. We remember, and now so will you. The message traveled outward at the speed of light. It passed the wreckage near Saturn. It passed the fleeing Drayan ships. It passed the cold, dark spaces between stars, where things without names drifted and listened. On a station orbiting a dying red star, a council of 12 species heard the message and fell silent. They had watched the Drayan march across the galaxy for centuries, swallowing world after world. No one had ever beaten them in open battle. No one had ever sent a message like this. One of them, an old being who had seen 100 worlds fall, turned to the others and said, "Mark that system. Do not go there. Those creatures do not kneel." Back on Earth, Sujin stood outside for the first time in 11 years. She stood on a hillside in Korea, near the coast, and she felt the wind on her face and the sun on her skin. She closed her eyes and breathed in the salt air. Behind her, Yunho stood quietly, giving her space. He knew what this moment meant. She opened her eyes and looked at the sky. It was blue, clear, ordinary. But she knew what was beyond it now. She knew what was waiting out there in the dark. And she knew that beneath the ice, inside the mountains, under the oceans, the ships were being repaired, refueled, and readied. Hana was back in her cockpit. Doyun was arguing with doctors. Jiwon was already writing new battle plans. And Tejo was sitting in his war room, staring at a map of the stars, planning not just for the next fight, but for the next 100 years. Earth had not asked for this. Earth had not wanted this. But Earth had answered. And the answer had echoed across the stars. The Drayan did not wait long. Their fleet moved within hours of the Black Fleet's launch. They had expected Earth to surrender. When it did not, they had expected confusion, scattered resistance, maybe a few missiles that would bounce off their shields like rain off stone. What they had not expected were 17 ships made of darkness that did not appear on half their sensors, and moved faster than anything they had seen from a species this young. The Drayan commander, a being whose name translated roughly to the voice of final things, ordered his fleet to reposition. He pulled them back from Earth's orbit, not out of fear, but out of strategy. He wanted distance. He wanted room to use his numbers. 400 ships against 17. The math was simple. He would surround them, crush them, and then return to burn the planet's surface until nothing was left but glass and silence. He chose to make his stand near Saturn. The pale rings of the great planet stretched out in every direction, a vast field of ice and rock and dust that would give his fleet cover and room to spread. He arranged his ships in a sphere formation, a wall of metal and energy with no gaps and no blind spots. He was old. He had conquered 11 worlds. He had never lost. He was about to learn something new. Captain Jiwan led the Black Fleet through the gap between Mars and Jupiter in under 6 hours. A journey that should have taken months with any known human technology took less than a day with the collapse drives. The ships moved through space not by pushing forward, but by pulling space toward them, folding distance like paper. Inside the ships, the crews felt nothing. No shaking, no pressure. Just a faint hum and the stars bending outside the windows. Jiwan was 40 years old. He was quiet, careful, and precise. He did not raise his voice. He gave orders the way a surgeon used a knife, with no wasted movement. He had been a naval officer before being recruited into the Black Fleet program. His file said he was exceptionally calm under pressure. His crew said he was made of stone and silence. Both were true. He stood on the bridge of Ship 5, watching the tactical display. Saturn filled one side of the screen, golden and enormous. The rings stretched across the display like a highway of light. And scattered across those rings, glowing red on the sensors, were the Drayan ships. 412 of them, arranged in a perfect sphere. "They want us to come to them," said his tactical officer, a woman named Mireille. She was young, sharp, and had a habit of stating the obvious in a way that made it sound like a threat. "Then we go to them," Jiwan said. He opened a channel to all 17 ships. "All units, this is Captain Jiwan. The enemy is in sphere formation near Saturn's rings. They are expecting a direct assault. We will not give them one. Ships 1 through 5, you are with me. We hit the north face. Ships 6 through 12, Commander Hana will lead you along the ring plane. Use the ice and debris for cover. Ships 13 through 17, you hold back. You are the hammer. When the sphere breaks, you go through." Hana's voice came through the channel. "Understood. We will be their shadow." The Black Fleet split into 3 groups and moved towards Saturn. The Dryans saw them coming. Their sensors picked up the human ships as faint flickering shapes, hard to track, harder to lock onto. The black hulls of the fleet absorbed most scanning frequencies. To the Dryan, it was like trying to see ghosts. G1's group hit first. 5 ships dove toward the north face of the Dryan sphere at full speed. The collapse drives pushed them forward so fast that by the time the Drayan fired their first volley, the human ships had already moved. Energy beams cut through empty space. Missiles detonated against nothing. The Black Fleet ships twisted and turned between the blasts, like dark fish in a river of light. G1's ship shook as a near miss grazed their shields. Alarms flared. Damage reports scrolled across his screen. He ignored them. "Return fire," he said calmly. Ship 5's main weapon fired. It was not a beam or a missile. It was a pulse, a wave of compressed space that hit a Drayan cruiser and folded it in on itself like a crushed can. The ship crumpled, sparked, and went dark in less than 2 seconds. The ships around it scattered in shock. Along the ring plane, Hana's group struck next. They came from below, hidden in the dust and ice of Saturn's rings. Her ships rose through the debris like sharks from deep water, firing as they climbed. 3 Drayan ships exploded before they even knew they were being attacked. The ring lit up with fire and light. The sphere formation broke. It had to. The Drayan could not hold a perfect shape when they were being hit from two sides by enemies they could barely see. Ships peeled away to chase the human vessels. The formation cracked, and through that crack, the hammer came. 5 ships from the reserve group, led by a young pilot named Do-yun, hit the center of the Drayan fleet like a spear through cloth. Do-yun was 26 years old. He had been flying since he was 16. He was not calm like Ji-won, or precise like Hana. He was fast, he was reckless, and he was exactly what this moment needed. His ship, Ship 14, was the smallest in the fleet. It was built for speed and nothing else. It carried one weapon, a short-range collapse charge that could destroy anything within 500 meters. The problem was that 500 meters meant Do-yun had to be close, very close, close enough to see the bolts on the enemy hull. He flew straight at the Drayan flagship. It was the largest ship in their fleet, 6 kilometers long, covered in weapons and armor and shields. It was the command center, the brain. Kill it, and the rest of the fleet would lose coordination. Mirei's voice came through his earpiece. Do-yun, you are too close. Pull back. No, he said, and he pushed the throttle to full. His ship screamed forward. Drayan weapons fired at him from every direction. He dodged left, rolled right, dove under a blast that would have cut his ship in half. His shields failed. His left engine caught fire. Warning lights turned his cockpit red. He did not slow down. He reached the flagship. He flew along its surface, so close that his ship's belly nearly scraped the alien hull. He found the shield generator, a massive glowing structure near the ship's core. He armed the collapse charge. He fired it point blank. The explosion was silent in space, but it was not small. The charge folded space around the shield generator and crushed it into a point the size of a grain of sand. The flagship's shields dropped instantly. Every weapon on every human ship locked onto the now exposed flagship and fired at once. The Drayan flagship broke apart. It did not explode. It shattered. Pieces of it tumbled through Saturn's rings, burning and spinning and falling apart. And with it went the Drayan command signal. The remaining ships lost coordination. They fired wildly. They turned on each other by accident. They ran. Ji-won watched the Drayan fleet scatter on his display. 300 ships, reduced to less than 200, in under an hour. The rest were running, jumping to faster-than-light travel, and disappearing into the dark between stars. He leaned back in his chair. His hands were shaking. He noticed and held them together until they stopped. All ships, cease fire, he said. Hold position. Silence fell across the fleet. 17 ships, battered, burned, some barely holding together, floated among the rings of Saturn. Behind them, the wreckage of the Drayan armada drifted like broken teeth. Do-yun's voice came through the channel, weak and crackling. Ship 14 still here. Mostly. I think I lost a wing. Hana laughed. It was the first sound anyone had made that was not an order or a warning. It echoed through the channel, and one by one, other voices joined. Not cheering, not celebrating, just breathing, just laughing, just alive. They had done the impossible, and the universe had noticed. Hana had not seen the sky in 4 years. She had almost forgotten what clouds looked like. She had almost forgotten the smell of rain, the warmth of sunlight on her face, the way the wind moved through open spaces. She had traded all of that for a metal cockpit and a chair that fit her body like a second skin. She had traded it willingly. She was 34 years old, and she was the best pilot humanity had. Not because she was the fastest or the bravest, though she was both of those things. She was the best because she could think in 3 dimensions, while most people struggled with 2. She could feel a ship around her, the way most people felt their own hands. When she flew, the machine was not a machine anymore. It was her. She had been chosen to lead the first wave, Commander Hana. The title still felt strange on her tongue. She had grown up in a small town near Sokcho, on the east coast of Korea. Her mother sold dried squid at the local market. As a child, Hana used to lie on the beach at night and stare at the stars. She would point at them and tell her mother she was going to fly there one day. Her mother would laugh and say, "Eat your rice first." Now she was sitting in the cockpit of Ship 3, the fastest vessel in the Black Fleet. Its official name was a long string of numbers and letters. The pilots called it the Knife. It was 140 meters long, shaped like a narrow blade, and it could cross the distance between Earth and the Moon in under 9 minutes. Hana loved it, the way some people love their dogs, completely and without reason. The hangar was alive with noise and motion. Engineers shouted across platforms. Magnetic clamps hissed as they released one by one. Power cables thicker than tree trunks were pulled away from the ships like roots being torn from the ground. The 17 ships of the Black Fleet hung in their cradles, dark and silent, their engines glowing faint blue from within. Hana's earpiece crackled. "Commander Hana, this is Admiral Tejo. Do you copy?" She pressed the button on her armrest. "I copy, Admiral. The ice ceiling will open in 12 minutes. You will lead ships 1 through 7 in the first wave. Captain Jiwan will follow with the second wave 4 minutes after. Your target is low orbit. Form a defensive line above the Pacific and hold position until all ships are clear." "Understood, sir." There was a pause. Then Tejo spoke again, quieter this time. "Hana, the whole world is about to see you. Every camera on every satellite is going to be pointed at Antarctica in 15 minutes. Every person on this planet is going to watch you rise. Give them something to believe in." Hana felt her chest tighten, not from fear, from weight. The weight of 8 billion people who did not know she existed until today. The weight of a species that had been told to kneel and had chosen not to. She breathed in, she breathed out. She wrapped her fingers around the control sticks and felt the ship hum in response. "They will believe," she said. The countdown began. On screens all across the base, numbers fell. 12, 11, 10. Engineers stepped back from the ships. Pilots sealed their cockpits. The air in the hangar grew cold as ventilation systems switched to launch mode. The floor vibrated as the ice above them began to split. It was an engineering wonder all on its own. The ceiling of the hangar was not just ice. It was a massive, movable structure, 300 meters thick, designed to open like a wound and close again in minutes, leaving no trace. It had been tested once, 5 years ago, in the middle of a blizzard. It had worked perfectly. No one above had noticed. Slowly at first, then faster. A crack of blinding white light appeared above them. The first real sunlight to enter this place in years. The light hit the black hulls of the ships and was swallowed. The ships did not shine. They did not glow. They drank the light and gave nothing back, as if they were holes in the world. The countdown hit 0. Hana pushed the throttle forward. Ship 3 rose first. The engines roared, not with fire, but with a deep, bone-shaking hum that rattled the walls of the hangar. The ship lifted off its clamps and climbed straight up, fast, faster than anything that size should move. It punched through the opening in the ice and exploded into the sky above Antarctica. Behind her, 6 more ships followed. One after another, they rose from the ice like dark arrows shot from the earth itself. The snow around the opening blew outward in a violent ring. The ice cracked for a kilometer in every direction. Penguins fled. The silence of Antarctica was shattered by the sound of 17 engines waking up from a 20-year sleep. Around the world, people saw it. Satellites caught the images and broadcast them instantly. A hole in the Antarctic ice, black shapes rising from it, climbing into the sky at impossible speed. The footage spread across every network in seconds. People stopped in the streets. They stopped in their cars. They stopped in their offices and their kitchens and their schools. They watched 7 black ships rise from the bottom of the world and climb toward the stars. Nobody spoke. Nobody could. Hana broke through the clouds in seconds. The sky turned from blue to dark blue to black. Stars appeared around her. The curve of the earth spread out below, blue and white and beautiful. And above her, scattered like dark stones across the sky, were the Drayan ships, hundreds of them, massive, silent, waiting. Hana's instruments lit up with warnings. The Drayan ships had detected them. Energy signatures shifted. Weapon systems activated. The aliens had expected surrender, not resistance, and certainly not this. Hana opened a channel to her wing. All ships, form on me. Diamond pattern. Weapons hot. Do not fire until I give the word. 6 voices answered. 6 ships moved into position around her. They hung in low orbit, a thin black line between the Earth and the armada above. 7 ships against 400. It was not a fair fight. It was not supposed to be. 4 minutes later, the second wave arrived. 10 more ships, led by Captain Jiwan, rising from different locations across the planet. From the ice, from the ocean, from the mountains. They climbed into orbit and joined the line. 17 ships now. The full black fleet. On the surface of the Earth, people were crying. Not from fear. From something they could not name. Something that had been sleeping inside them for a very long time. They had been told to kneel. They had been told they were weak. They had been told they had no choice. And then, 17 black ships had risen from the earth like a fist. Hana looked out through her cockpit window. The earth was behind her. The enemy was ahead. She could feel her ship breathing around her, alive and ready. She could hear the hum of its engine, steady and strong, like a heartbeat. She did not kneel. The place had no name. It existed on no map. If you flew over it in a plane, you would see nothing but ice stretching in every direction, flat and white and endless. If you scanned it with radar, you would find only rock and frozen water beneath the surface. But if you knew where to look, and if you had the right codes, and if your blood matched the right file, you would find a door. And behind that door, buried 3 kilometers under the Antarctic ice, was the largest secret humanity had ever kept. Su Jin had lived inside that secret for 11 years. She was 41 years old, thin, with sharp eyes and hands that never shook. She was an engineer. Not the kind who fixed pipes or wired buildings. She was the kind who built things that should not exist. Things that bent the rules of physics and whispered back when you asked them questions. She had been recruited when she was 30, pulled from a university lab in Busan, where she had been quietly solving equations that her professor said were unsolvable. A man in a gray suit had visited her office one evening. He had shown her a piece of metal that weighed nothing and reflected no light. He had asked her if she wanted to know where it came from. She had said yes. She had not seen the sun since. The underground base was called Site Zero by the people who worked there. There were 900 of them. Engineers, physicists, pilots, soldiers, doctors, cooks. They lived in metal corridors lit by artificial light. They ate food grown in hydroponic labs. They exercised in rooms with no windows. They had given up the sky so that one day, if the worst came, the sky would not be given up for everyone else. Su Jin stood in the main hangar and looked up. Above her, hanging from massive magnetic clamps, was Ship 1. Its hull was black, not painted black, but made of a material that absorbed light and gave nothing back. It had no visible seams, no bolts, no rivets. It looked like it had been carved from a single piece of darkness. Su Jin had helped design it. She had spent 4 years on its engine alone. The engine was the heart of everything. They called it a collapse drive. It worked by creating a tiny, controlled collapse of space, pulling the ship forward by falling into a point that moved ahead of it. The math behind it was beautiful and terrifying. Sujin had understood it the first time she saw the alien object they had recovered near Saturn. The object was small, no bigger than a football, but inside it was a miniature engine that did exactly what she had only theorized. Someone else, somewhere out there, had already solved the problem. All she had to do was make it bigger. It had taken 6 years to build the first engine. The first 3 prototypes had failed. One of them had collapsed a section of the base, killing 2 technicians. Their names were Hyun and Eunbi. Sujin still thought about them every morning. She had promised herself that their deaths would not be wasted, and they had not been. The 4th prototype worked. It hummed like a living thing, low and deep, and when they turned it on for the first time, the entire base had vibrated like a struck bell. Sujin had cried, not from joy, but from the weight of what she had built. Now there were 17 engines, 17 ships, each one slightly different, each one designed for a different role. Some were fast, some were heavy, some carried weapons that could cut through a moon. And one, Ship 1, the first and the largest, carried something else. Something Sujin had built in secret, even from the rest of the team. A weapon with no name, a device that could fold space around a target and crush it into nothing. She had built it because she believed that if the enemy ever came, they would come in force. And force required an answer that was not just strong, but final. Her assistant, a young man named Yoon-ho, walked up beside her. He was 28, tall, and always looked slightly worried. He held a tablet, and his fingers moved nervously over its surface. The activation code came through, he said quietly. Sujin did not move. When? 12 minutes ago. Direct from Admiral Tae-ho. Code black, full deployment. All 17 ships. Sujin nodded. She had always known this day would come. She had planned for it, dreamed about it, feared it. Now that it was here, she felt strangely calm, like a storm that had finally arrived after years of dark clouds. Begin the wake-up sequence, she said. Start with the engines. I want all cores active within 6 hours. Yoon-ho hesitated. All 17 at once? We have never done that before. The power draw alone could? I know what it could do, Sujin said firmly. Do it anyway. Yoon-ho nodded and walked away quickly. Sujin watched him go, then looked back up at Ship 1. She placed her hand on the cold railing in front of her. The metal hummed faintly under her fingers. The ship was already waking up. Around the hangar, lights began to change, red to amber, amber to white. Sirens sounded, not loud, but steady, a pulse that told everyone in the base that the thing they had trained for was no longer a drill. People moved with purpose. Engineers ran to their stations. Pilots suited up in silence. Soldiers checked weapons they hoped they would not need. Sujin walked through the base one last time. She passed the mess hall, where the cooks were packing emergency rations. She passed the medical bay, where Dr. Jaewon was preparing surgical kits. She passed the sleeping quarters, where beds were still warm from the people who had just left them. This place had been her home for over a decade. These walls, these lights, these people. She knew every corridor, every crack in the concrete, every flicker in the overhead lights. She stopped at a small window that looked into the engine room of Ship 1. Inside, the collapse drive was spinning up. A faint blue light glowed at its center, growing brighter with each second. The light was beautiful. It always was. The most dangerous things usually were. She pressed her hand against the glass. We built you for this, she whispered. Don't let us down. The engine answered with a low, deep hum that shook the floor beneath her feet. Far above, the Drayan ships floated in silence, waiting for Earth to kneel. They had no idea what was waking up beneath the ice. They had scanned the planet 100 times. They had mapped every military base, every weapon, every satellite. They had concluded that Earth was a young, weak civilization with primitive technology and no hope of resistance. They had not scanned deep enough, and by the time they realized their mistake, it would be far too late. The message came on a Tuesday morning. It did not come through radio. It did not come through satellite. It came through everything. Every screen on the planet lit up at the same time. Every phone, every television, every billboard, every laptop. Even the old monitors in abandoned buildings flickered to life. The message was short, and it was clear. It said, "People of Earth, you have been watched. You have been measured. You are now claimed. You will kneel before the Drayan Empire within 7 rotations of your sun. If you do not kneel, you will be removed." The world went silent for exactly 4 seconds. Then it screamed. Cities erupted into chaos. People ran into the streets. Governments called emergency meetings. News channels repeated the message over and over, as if saying it again would somehow change the words. Religious leaders called it the end of days. Scientists called it first contact. Generals called it a threat. But no one called it a lie. Because hanging above every major city on Earth, visible even in daylight, were ships. Not 1 or 2, hundreds. They were enormous, dark and still. They did not move. They did not fire. They simply floated there, waiting, like patient predators watching their prey decide whether to run. In Seoul, Admiral Tae-ho sat in a room deep underground. The room had no windows. It had 1 long table, 12 chairs, and more screens than walls. He was 56 years old. His hair was gray at the sides, and his face carried the kind of weight that came not from age, but from decisions. He had commanded fleets. He had buried soldiers. He had shaken hands with people he did not trust, and made peace with enemies he did not forgive. But nothing in his life had prepared him for this. His aide, a young officer named Bo-ra, walked in with a tablet. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were not. She placed the tablet on the table. "Sir, the World Council is requesting your presence. Every nation has agreed to a joint emergency session. They want a response within 2 hours." Tae-ho did not look at the tablet. He looked at the wall. On it was a map of the world. Every red dot on it represented a Drayan ship. There were 412 of them. "What do the analysts say?" he asked. Bo-ra swallowed. "They say the ships are real. The energy signatures do not match anything we have ever recorded. Their materials are unknown. Their size is, sir, the smallest one is 3 kilometers long." Tae-ho nodded slowly. He had expected this. Not today, not this year, but someday. Humanity had always known it was not alone. The signs had been there for decades. Strange signals, vanishing probes, objects near Jupiter that moved in ways rocks should not move. The governments of the world had quietly agreed to ignore it all, hoping the universe would return the favor. It had not. "And the weapons?" Tae-ho asked. "We don't know what they have. But our models suggest that even one of those ships could flatten a continent." Tae-ho closed his eyes. He breathed in through his nose, held it, and let it out. Then he stood up and walked to a panel on the far wall. He pressed his hand against it. A light scanned his palm, then his eye. Then a small needle pricked his finger and tasted his blood. The panel beeped once and slid open. Behind it was a keypad. Tae-ho typed in a code he had memorized 20 years ago and had never once spoken out loud. A drawer opened beneath the keypad. Inside it was a single black folder. On the front of the folder, printed in white letters, were 2 words, Black Fleet. Bo-ra stared at it. "Sir, what is that?" Tae-ho picked up the folder and held it like it was made of glass. 20 years ago, he said quietly, a group of people decided that if something like this ever happened, Earth would not beg. Earth would not bargain. Earth would answer. He opened the folder. Inside were documents, blueprints, coordinates, and a single activation code. The blueprints showed ships. Not like the ones floating above their cities. These were different. Sleek, dark, angular. They looked like blades made of shadow. We built them in secret, Tejo continued. Beneath the ice in Antarctica. Beneath the ocean floor near the Mariana Trench. Inside hollowed mountains in Siberia. No government officially approved it. No budget officially funded it. But it happened. Because some of us knew that the sky was not empty, and that whatever lived up there would not come in peace. Bo-Ra shook her head slowly. How many? 17 ships. Each one carrying weapons that do not exist in any public record. Each one powered by technology that we reversed from objects we found drifting near Saturn 15 years ago. Objects that were not ours. Bo-Ra sat down. Her legs seemed to give up on standing. 17 ships against 400? Tejo looked at her. There was no fear in his eyes. There was something else. Something older and harder. You are counting wrong, he said. You are counting ships. I am counting will. Those things up there came here expecting to find a world on its knees. They sent a message demanding surrender before firing a single shot. You know what that tells me? Bo-Ra shook her head. It tells me they want us to give up, which means they are not sure what happens if we don't. He closed the folder and placed it under his arm. Then he walked toward the door. Sir, Bo-Ra said, standing quickly, what do I tell the World Council? Tejo stopped at the door. Tell them Admiral Tejo respectfully declines the invitation to discuss surrender. Tell them Earth has a fleet they have never seen. And tell them we are not kneeling. Not today. Not ever. He walked out of the room and into the corridor. The lights above him buzzed softly. His boots clicked on the concrete floor. Somewhere far above him, 400 alien ships hung in the sky like a death sentence. But deep below the ice, in hangars no satellite had ever seen, 17 black ships waited in the dark. Their engines were cold, their weapons were loaded, their hulls had never touched sunlight. They had been built for this moment, and their moment had come.